That brings the time now to 7 minutes past 8. The Ministry of Defence has agreed a formula to sort out compensation claims for Bloody Sunday after the families of two men who were shot dead received settlements of £700,000 between them in landmark legal cases at the High Court. The family of father of 8, Gerard McKinney, who was shot dead at Abbey Park, they were awarded £625,000. The family of 20-year-old Michael McDade, who was killed near a barricade in Rosville Street, received £75,000. You may remember last week Michael Quinn, who was shot in the face on Bloody Sunday, was awarded £193,000 in compensation. Well, solicitor Fearghal Shiels took all three test cases.
I think the overwhelming reaction of both the McKinney and the McDade families is one of relief. Relief that this process has come to an end, and relief that the case is settled without the requirement for either Mr McKinney's two daughters or indeed Kevin McDade, brother of Michael McDade, to have to give evidence to the court. It had seemed inevitable that at least Mr McKinney's daughters would have had to give evidence because no settlement had appeared likely. The MOD had sought to resile from its own forensic accountant report on Friday of last week and wanted to introduce a new report which would have reduced the financial loss in that case tenfold. However, after strong objections by the family's legal team yesterday, the MOD abandoned that application at lunchtime, creating a situation whereby a settlement could be reached in the cases.
They're two quite different financial settlements. Talk to me about what's considered when it comes to agreeing a financial settlement.
Well, I think it's important to remember that Jerry McKinney was a married father of 8 children. He had been in full-time employment for all of his adult life, despite the chronic unemployment that had prevailed in Derry throughout this period. He had also opened his own businesses on occasion. And in those circumstances, the financial loss to his family was always going to be much more significant than, for example, Michael McDade, who was a young man, single with no children. The quantity of financial loss to Jerry McKinney's family was calculated by forensic accountants, separately instructed by our office on behalf of Mrs McKinney and also by the MOD. The settlement which was eventually arrived at was effectively close to the middle of the competing accounts that both sides had arrived at. It does seem that there is an inherent unfairness when a settlement for a young single man is comparatively low.
What was the counter-argument put forward by the Ministry of Defence in terms of the financial settlement and what they were willing to initially offer?
The Ministry of Defence had, in June of this year, served a forensic accountant report which put the financial loss to Mr McKinney's family at a substantial six-figure sum. What they tried to do yesterday was apply to serve a further report which reduced that financial loss to a sum of around just over 60,000. What they sought to do was introduce the circumstances which would have prevailed should this action have been brought in the 1970s rather than applying current modern day standards, which is now the accepted method of doing this. It is the way that their accountant had approached it in the same way as our own accountant. But then, as I say, the MOD tried to resile from that just at the end of last week.
These were 3 test cases. How many more cases need to be resolved, and will it just be a matter of agreement now and settlement, or will there have to be more hearings in court?
There are a total of 31 separate actions. 3 have now been resolved. The remaining cases, we would be extremely hopeful that these can be settled without the need for any formal hearing in court, without the requirement for any family members or the wounded to have to give oral evidence. The assessment of damages in these cases, it's not simply about what happened on Bloody Sunday itself, but rather how the events of Bloody Sunday impacted upon the relatives and the wounded for the last 46 years. It would involve a public examination of deeply private and personal information, and it's something that, in my view, is entirely avoidable should both parties take a pragmatic and sensible approach to resolve the outstanding issues. The cases will be reviewed in the coming weeks by Mr Justice Michael Linden, and it's hoped that that agreement can be reached between the parties in the meantime. Should that not be possible, then there will be no option but to list cases for hearing. But we would be confident that that can be avoided.
Just finally, Mr. Shiels, obviously the families involved in these 3 test cases, and indeed anyone who takes a civil case, it's not about the financial settlement. Is there a sense of closure here?
Yes, there certainly is a sense of closure, particularly for Mr. McKinney's family, because the soldier responsible for that shooting is now deceased. In terms of Mr. McDade, the soldier responsible for that shooting is still alive, and a decision on whether he should be prosecuted is expected within the coming months.
That was Solicitor Fearghal Shiels speaking there. A Ministry of Defence spokesperson told us, "Our thoughts remain with those who were affected by these tragic events. We respect the court's decision with regard to these claims and will fully comply with the direction given."